I received an unexpected call from my son a few days before my birthday. When I answered, I noticed the voice of my unhappy daughter-in-law in the background. While talking to my son, I realized I could clearly hear her manipulative whispers. That's when my son said something that made my heart stop. My name is Helen, and at 72, I thought I had experienced all of life's nuances. How wrong I was. Life, like the wilderness I so deeply love, always holds a surprise in reserve, an unexpected bolt from the blue that can either illuminate or incinerate what we believe to be unshakable. The scent of pine and damp earth was never just an aroma to me. It was the perfume of my happiness, the very essence of my cabin. That place, nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, its timber walls holding whispers of laughter and shared secrets, was our sanctuary. Mine and my beloved late husband, Mark's. Every plank, every window, every flower planted around the porch was raised by Mark's hands and watered with the love we cultivated for over 40 years. I was the guardian of these memories, a woman who had learned resilience in the face of life's storms, fiercely attached to fairness, and with a stubbornness that many mistook for strength. I prided myself on that fortress, but I would soon discover it was more fragile than I ever imagined. The call came on a gray Tuesday, a day that promised the usual calm of my retirement. The phone rang, and the voice of my son, Daniel, echoed from the other side. Since he married Patricia, a cold distance had settled between us, like a fog that refused to lift. His voice, once warm and full of the enthusiasm I remembered so well from his childhood, now sounded strange, almost hollow, shaped by an influence I barely recognized. "Mom, I need the cabin for your birthday weekend," he said bluntly, as if he were stating a trivial fact, devoid of weight or consideration. The initial surprise hit me not like a shock wave, but like a gentle tide of almost childish hope. A warm hunch began to spread through my chest, a glimmer of joy in the routine my life had become. Maybe, just maybe, he was planning a surprise celebration for me, a reunion with the Daniel I knew so well, the one who seemed to have gotten lost in the fog of adult life. Oh, how I clung to that image of a thoughtful son. My mistake was as naive as it was painful, and the revelation came with the brutality of a punch to the gut. The party wasn't for me. It was for my daughter-in-law's family. 30 relatives. 30, I repeated, the word escaping as an incredulous whisper, the air leaving my lungs. The cabin, with its 3 cozy bedrooms, so perfectly sized for the 2 of us and for Daniel's occasional visits before his marriage, could barely accommodate a dozen people, let alone a crowd of 30. His motive, then, became painfully clear: to impress his new family, to display a generosity that wasn't his, to show off a luxury that was the fruit of someone else's entire life's work. My daughter-in-law, Patricia, a woman whose ambition was as evident as her disdain for everything I stood for, was the conductor of this orchestra of disrespect. She wanted the status the cabin provided, the perfect backdrop for her social media photos, and I, the true owner of the memories and that home, was just an obstacle to be removed, an inconvenience to be ignored. My internal conflict was an all-out war, waged in the very core of my soul. A mother's unconditional love, that ancient force rooted so deeply in a woman's heart, fought desperately against the wounded woman, the owner whose most basic rights were being violated. I tried to reason with him, with the calm that experience had taught me to forge, even under pressure. I suggested other dates, other venues, any alternative that might preserve my sanctuary and my dignity. But his response was a knife in my chest, twisted slowly to maximize the pain. "Don't even think about showing up. You're not welcome." The humiliation was public and calculated. He made sure to say it during a video call, with his wife smiling subtly in the background. It was a smile I saw form on her lips, thin and triumphant, as Daniel's camera captured my devastated expression. Her smile, filled with the certainty of victory, was the final straw. The sadness that had enveloped me like a heavy cloak suddenly gave way to a cold, determined fury. A frigid fire that began to burn in my chest. They not only wanted me out, but they also planned to use my refuge to celebrate my own birthday without me. And I knew, in that instant, that I would not stand idly by. The period following that brutal call was a whirlwind, a tempest of emotions and thoughts that stole my sleep and my peace. The month leading up to the fateful date of my birthday and the planned invasion of my cabin seemed to both crawl and fly by. Each day was a silent battle against bitterness and disbelief, but also an awakening to a new resolve. I had cried, yes, in secret, the hot, bitter tears of a mother who feels betrayed by her own son. But slowly, sadness was replaced by an icy clarity. I was no longer just the vulnerable Helen. I was the guardian of Mark's memories, the keeper of a legacy, and I would not allow it to be desecrated. My mind, which many thought of as simple and unassuming, began to work with a precision that surprised even me. I remembered an old folder of documents my husband kept, stored with an almost reverential care at the back of a dusty closet, behind stacks of photo albums and boxes of keepsakes. Mark was a man of details, of impeccable organization, and the idea that there might be some clue, some legal protection within it, lit a small flame of hope inside me. With hands that were trembling but steady, I opened the closet, the smell of old paper and lavender washing over me. Amidst papers yellowed by time, newspaper clippings of past events, and love letters Mark had written me in his youth, I found it, the original deed to the cabin. My heart leapt, a strong, anxious beat against my ribs. And there, highlighted in a section my eyes almost missed because the print was so small, was the life estate clause in my name. A wave of relief, mixed with a pang of bitter irony, washed over me. My son, in his haste to claim the idea of the property, the image it projected, had never bothered to check the details. This discovery was my first thread of hope, the first stone I had found to rebuild the fortress that had been shaken. The next day, I contacted an old family friend, Robert, a retired attorney whom Mark had always admired and with whom he played chess on Sundays. Robert's voice on the phone was the same as ever, calm, measured, full of a quiet wisdom. I explained the situation as clearly as I could, feeling each word weigh on my tongue. He listened attentively, without interruption, and his confirmation of the document's unquestionable validity was like a balm to my wounded soul. The life estate, he assured me, gave me the unrestricted right to use and enjoy the cabin as long as I lived. It was non-negotiable, inalienable. That was my home, and no one, not even my own son, could take it from me. But the conversation didn't end there. As we talked, Robert, with the casualness of someone sharing a minor detail, happened to mention the financial troubles of my daughter-in-law's father, a Mr. Arnold. He was a man known in town for his failed businesses and his, let's say, less than stellar reputation. A subplot began to form in my mind, a piece that fit into the puzzle of Patricia and her ambition. My daughter-in-law didn't just want a luxurious weekend to impress her family. She saw the cabin as a future financial asset, a way to secure some stability for her own kin, perhaps even to salvage her father's image. Daniel's naivete, letting himself be guided by her maneuvers, was eating away at me. I realized the cabin was more than a home to me. It was a symbol, a prize in the invisible contest being waged. The humiliation, however, continued to dog me like a persistent shadow. A few days later, I received a printed invitation. It was in extremely poor taste, formal and impersonal, for a family celebration at my cabin's address on the exact date of my birthday. Patricia's elegant handwriting adorned a handwritten note at the bottom. "So you know we'll be thinking of you." That was the last straw, a veiled insult that made my cup of patience overflow. It was definitive proof that the intention was not just to use the cabin, but to exclude me, to erase me from my own life. My son, for his part, tried to manipulate me, alternating between false promises to make it up to me later. "We'll have lunch, Mom, just the two of us," and veiled threats to cut off contact permanently if I made a scene. Every word from him was another nail in the coffin of the image I still held of the boy I had raised, the one who once climbed onto my lap asking for a hug. My countermove began to take shape, a bold, almost unthinkable idea, but one that now seemed the only honorable way out. I would not be the helpless, old woman they expected. The cold fury that had settled in my chest was not destructive, but rather a driving force, a silent engine powering my every step in the days that followed. I would not be the passive victim they expected. The thought of Patricia and Daniel using the cabin, our cabin, for an empty display of vanity, on my birthday, while so cruelly excluding me, was a poison I refused to swallow. My counter-move, which was once just a spark of outrage, began to take a more concrete form, shaped with the precision of a sculptor. I knew I would need help, allies who understood the depth of my pain and the justice of my cause. My siblings and cousins had always been my safe harbor, an extension of the family Mark and I had built. They knew the cabin, its stories, the sweat and love Mark had poured into every corner. One afternoon, I gathered them at my house, the aroma of fresh coffee and cornbread, trying to bring an air of normalcy to a meeting that was anything but ordinary. I began to speak, my voice initially choked with emotion, but gaining firmness as the facts unfolded. I told them about the call, Daniel's demand, the humiliation of the invitation, Patricia's triumphant smirk. I saw the outrage grow in their eyes, jaws tightening, hands clenching into discreet fists. My cousin Lucy, always the most outspoken, shook her head in disbelief, her face etched with incredulity. My brother, George, a man of few words but with a giant heart, just looked at me with a pain that mirrored my own. "They can't do this to you, Helen," Lucy finally burst out, her voice thick with anger. "It's an outrage. It's Mark's cabin, your home." Her words were a balm to my soul, the confirmation that I was not alone, that my pain was shared, my cause just. George, in turn, offered me a tight hug, a silent gesture that spoke more than 1,000 words. They became my allies, ready to act, to support me in whatever plan I devised. This unity, this unconditional support from my family, was the shot of courage I needed to turn fury into strategy, hurt into action. The plan, I admit, seemed audacious, bordering on insolent, but it was the only way to reverse the situation without stooping to their level. It required perfect execution, a synchronicity that seemed almost impossible, but hope propelled me forward. My mind was buzzing with ideas, and one in particular, a suggestion from Lucy, began to stand out. She had mentioned my nephew, Raphael, who worked in event planning. Raphael was a brilliant young man, creative and with a sense of justice that resembled his aunt's. I called him that same night, and his cheerful voice, upon hearing mine, brought me a sliver of lightness. I explained everything to him, and with each detail, I felt his indignation grow. He listened with the seriousness of a veteran, his event producer's mind already racing. "Aunt Helen," he said, his voice now serious, "this is unacceptable. We're going to teach them a lesson they'll never forget." The idea of renting out the cabin for an event on the same weekend, proposed by Raphael, seemed crazy at first, but it was the master key to my counterattack. But it wouldn't be just any event. I didn't want mere retaliation. I wanted redemption, a celebration of what Mark represented and what they, in their blind ambition, seemed to have forgotten. I used the savings Mark had left, a fund he always said was, "for your little follies." Helen, I decided this would be the most glorious of my follies. My idea was to organize a weekend retreat for a charity Mark had always supported, an association that cared for destitute elderly people, the Haven of Hope. These seniors, often forgotten by society, would be my guests of honor, and the cabin would be transformed into a haven of joy and solidarity. It was the perfect way to honor Mark's memory and, at the same time, teach Daniel and Patricia an unforgettable lesson about altruism and respect. Raphael embraced the idea with enthusiasm, his eyes shining with the prospect of the challenge. We began to work on the details, every step calculated, every move planned. We publicized the event in the local press, with the help of a journalist friend of Raphael's, as a posthumous tribute celebrating the legacy of generosity of my late husband. Exactly on my birthday weekend, the articles spoke of Mark's kindness, the association, the joy of being able to offer a moment of peace and care to so many in need. The setting, which was to have been the stage for a party of ostentation and selfishness, was about to be transformed into a symbol of philanthropy and love. The news spread like wildfire, and the community embraced the idea with enthusiasm. Volunteers offered their help, donations began to arrive, and the cabin, which was to be usurped, now flourished with a greater purpose. The anticipation for the big day grew, and I felt a mix of nervousness and a rising satisfaction. The stage was set, the curtain about to rise. But what would happen when my unwanted guests arrived for their party? The uncertainty was a knot in my stomach, but determination was a flame in my heart. The days following the decision to turn my pain into an act of love were filled with an energy I didn't know I still possessed. The cabin, which had once seemed a heavy burden of memories and a stage for imminent humiliation, now pulsed with new life, a new purpose. Raphael, my nephew, proved to be a true maestro, coordinating every detail with impressive dedication. He turned the idea into reality, handling logistics, volunteers, and publicity. Lucy and George, my siblings, were with me every step of the way, their steady hands offering support, their words of encouragement warming my heart. The Haven of Hope, the elderly charity, embraced the proposal with tears in their eyes and gratitude in every smile. Amidst all the hustle and bustle, I found quiet moments to reflect. I would walk through the cabin's gardens, feeling the gentle breeze in my white hair, the scent of pine and damp earth enveloping me like a familiar hug. Every flower, every tree, every stone seemed to whisper Mark's name. I remembered how he had planted the first lavender seeds near the porch, how he would laugh when I scolded him for leaving his tools scattered about. It was our sanctuary, and now, more than ever, I felt his presence there, pushing me forward, reminding me of the kindness and generosity he had always cultivated. This memory gave me strength, an unshakable certainty that I was on the right path, honoring not only myself, but also the legacy of the man I loved. The local press, as Raphael had planned, did an excellent job. The articles were moving, highlighting the initiative, Mark's dedication to the community, and my desire to continue his work. They painted a picture of altruism and solidarity, the exact opposite of what Daniel and Patricia intended. The calls started coming in, from friends and acquaintances, congratulating me on the initiative. Every word of support was a shield against the sting of hurt I still felt for my son. How could he be so blind, so oblivious to the beauty of a true act of love, preferring the superficiality of ostentation? The final days before the birthday weekend were a mix of nervousness and contained excitement. Volunteers began arriving at the cabin, bringing with them a contagious energy, young and old, all with the same sparkle in their eyes, ready to help. Tables were set up in the garden, Not for a lavish banquet, but for simple, delicious meals prepared with love. The rocking chairs on the porch were decorated with colorful blankets, inviting for our future guests. The cabin was gaining a new purpose, a noble one. I watched everything, a discreet tear running down my face, a tear of gratitude and hope. On the eve of the big day, the vans from the Haven of Hope began to make their way up the winding road. I stood on the porch, my heart pounding, watching the scene unfold. Seniors, some in wheelchairs, others with walkers, got out of the vans, their wrinkled faces lighting up with smiles. The cabin, which was to be the stage for a party of vanity, now resonated with the genuine joy of those who most needed care and attention. A woman, with hair as white as snow, hugged me tightly, her eyes welling up. "What a blessed place, my dear," she said, her voice choked with emotion. In that moment, all my doubts vanished. This was my place, my mission, and I would not allow it to be corrupted. On my birthday, the sun rose majestically over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The cabin was in celebration, but not the celebration Daniel and Patricia had imagined. The aroma of fresh coffee and homemade bread hung in the air, mixed with the soft scent of pine. The seniors laughed, chatted, played dominoes at the garden tables. The volunteers were attentive and busy, and the gentle music of a guitar filled the air. The journalists were already in place, their cameras and recorders capturing every moment of joy. I was radiant, dressed in one of my favorite dresses, a serene smile on my lips. But behind the serenity, a tension was building. I knew that at any moment, the vans with my daughter-in-law's family would appear. The wait was agonizing, but my determination was unshakable. What would happen when the facade of charity and Patricia's contempt collided head-on on the road to the cabin? The answer was just minutes away. Coming up the mountain, the air, which had seemed light and festive, now carried an almost palpable tension. Each passing minute felt like an hour, and my eyes, though I tried to hide it, constantly scanned the winding road leading to the cabin. I knew they would come. My son Daniel and his wife Patricia, accompanied by that horde of 30 relatives, each of them expecting the lavish party they had been promised. The joy and serenity of the seniors, the smiles of the volunteers, the buzz of conversations, and the soft melody of the guitar were a stark contrast to the icy anticipation that filled my chest. I was ready, yes, but adrenaline pumped through my veins, and a knot tightened in my stomach. Suddenly, a movement around the bend. 3 dark SUVs, gleaming in the morning sun, began to climb the dirt road. The tension in the air condensed. My heart leapt, a strong, uneven beat. It was them, the reporters, who had been chatting and capturing the joyful moments, noticed the arrival and quickly turned towards the road, their cameras at the ready, microphones raised. The volunteers, whom I had discreetly briefed, remained calm and smiling, continuing their activities. But I could feel the expectation in their eyes. The delicate banner, which read, "Welcome to the Solidarity Retreat in memory of a great man," swayed gently in the breeze, a silent invitation and, for them, surely, an enigma. The SUVs came to an abrupt halt at the cabin's entrance, not in the driveway, but in the area Raphael had strategically blocked off for the reception of the seniors. The sight was, for them, unimaginable. The garden, which Patricia had likely pictured decorated with buffet tables and lavish floral arrangements for her social media photos, was now filled with wheelchairs and walkers. Seniors sat on benches, cups of tea in hand, chatting animatedly. A group was singing an old song, accompanied by a volunteer's guitar. The smell of barbecue they might have expected was replaced by the gentle aroma of tea and homemade cakes, a fragrance of simplicity and care. The door of the first SUV opened, and out stepped Patricia, elegantly dressed, followed by Daniel, his face pale and wearing an expression I had never seen before. They looked shocked, their eyes sweeping the scene with growing disbelief. Her family, getting out of the other SUVs, looked equally confused and annoyed. Sullen faces, murmurs of discontent began to rise. Patricia, who seemed to have rehearsed a grand entrance, now found herself in the middle of a scene that completely dismantled her plans. Her triumphant smile, the one I had seen on the video call, had vanished, replaced by a mask of bewilderment and restrained fury. Daniel stood beside her, his gaze locking onto mine, a mixture of anger and something that looked like shame. I, with a serene smile, walked towards them. My step was firm. My voice, though laced with a calculated sweetness, held the strength of my determination. "What a pleasant surprise. Have you come for the charity event?" I asked, my voice sounding innocent, almost naive, but with a glint in my eyes that she would not be able to decipher. The shock on their faces was palpable. They were caught in their own trap, unsure how to react. The journalists, sensing the tension, moved closer, their cameras filming every detail of the scene. The look on Patricia's face was a mix of shock, rage, and a public humiliation she couldn't hide. Her jaw was tight, her eyes flashed, but she was speechless, caught by the situation. Daniel, beside her, seemed even more lost. He tried to say something, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. In front of the journalists and the guests, they couldn't make a scene. Their reputation, which they valued so much, was on the line, exposed to curious eyes and eager lenses. My daughter-in-law's family, confused and irritated, began to disperse, some returning to the SUVs, others just watching the scene with morbid curiosity. They had to turn back, their plans ruined, their trip and their ostentation reduced to dust. The lesson was silent, but devastating. I didn't need to shout or forbid them. I simply reclaimed what was mine, transforming an act of selfishness into a celebration of love and memory. I showed them that the true owner of that place, and of my own life, had always been me. But the story doesn't end here. For Patricia and Daniel's humiliation was only the beginning of a series of unexpected events. How they would react to this reversal was something not even I could have predicted. The quiet that followed my question, so soft and seemingly innocent, weighed like an anvil on Patricia and Daniel's shoulders. The silence was so thick I could hear the whir of the journalists, cameras, and the gentle murmur of the seniors watching the scene with restrained curiosity. Patricia's eyes, once flashing with fury, now seemed frozen, caught between public humiliation and the desperate need to keep up appearances. Daniel, beside her, was completely paralyzed, his face as white as a sheet, his mouth still half open, as if searching for words that refused to come. The scene was almost theatrical, a silent drama playing out under the morning sun. I watched Patricia, every detail of her expression. Her body was tense, her fists clenched at her sides, visibly trembling. I could feel the rage bubbling under her perfectly applied makeup, but she couldn't explode. Not there, not in front of the reporters who were eagerly documenting every millimeter of her embarrassment. A quick glance at her family, huddled behind the SUVs, revealed the same mix of confusion and irritation. Some whispered, others pointed discreetly at me in the cabin, which was so full of life and purpose. The image of their lavish party had been pulverized by a charity retreat. Finally, Patricia managed to articulate a few words, her voice strained, like a silk thread stretched to its limit. "Mother Helen," she began, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise. We didn't know there would be an event." Her voice dripped with falsehood, but I maintained my serene expression. Daniel, for his part, just shook his head, unable to look at me directly. His eyes darted to the seniors, to the volunteers. to anywhere but me. I felt a pang of genuine sadness for him. The boy who had once hugged me with such sincerity was now so lost in his own web of ambition and disrespect. I didn't give them a chance to elaborate. "Yes, dear," I replied, my voice a little louder so the journalists could hear. "It's a wonderful retreat for the haven of hope, in memory of my dear Mark. He always dreamed of using the cabin for something like this. I'm so happy to be able to fulfill that wish on my birthday." My words were a 1-2 punch. They reaffirmed my right to the cabin and linked the event to Mark's legacy, making any protest from them a direct affront to my late husband's memory. The move was risky, but I was willing to take it. The effect was immediate. Patricia grew even paler, and Daniel finally raised his eyes to me, a flicker of pain and incomprehension mixed with his anger. He had been caught, not just in his lie, but in his ingratitude. The journalists, sensing the family drama underlying the charity story, started asking questions, their microphones extending toward Daniel and Patricia. "Sir, ma'am, did you know about this event? What is your relationship with the foundation? It's a moving tribute, isn't it?" The questions were simple, but the trap was set. They couldn't lie without being exposed, and the truth would paint them as the villains of the story. Patricia's family, seeing the embarrassing situation unfold, began to back away. The whispers grew louder, the disapproving looks directed at Patricia and Daniel. Some of them, I realized, had probably heard about Patricia's father's questionable reputation and likely didn't want to be associated with another scandal. The scene was a disaster for them, and a retreat became inevitable. Daniel, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 frustrations, touched Patricia's arm. His lips moved in a nearly inaudible, "Let's go." Patricia, with one last withering glare in my direction, a look that promised future retaliation, turned abruptly and walked back to the SUV. Daniel followed her, his posture slumped. The SUVs, one by one, began to maneuver, turning around in the small clearing. Patricia's family, now visibly angry and disappointed, followed them, leaving behind a trail of dust and ruined plans. The cabin and its garden, moments before the stage for a suffocating tension, once again resonated with the laughter of the seniors and the soft music of the guitar. The victory was mine, undeniable and sweet. But as I watched the SUVs disappear around the bend in the road, a strange premonition settled in my chest. Patricia's look, that silent promise of revenge, wouldn't leave me alone. I knew this wasn't over. What would Patricia do now, with her pride wounded and her plans thwarted, to try to reclaim what she considered hers? The calm was only temporary. I could feel it. The dust kicked up by Patricia and Daniel's SUV settled, taking with it the tension that had hung in the air. A collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the cabin's garden. The journalists, pleased with the unexpected drama, continued to document the moments of joy and solidarity, but now with a new angle for their stories. The seniors, some oblivious to what had happened, others with knowing smiles, resumed their activities, and the melody of the guitar once again filled the space. I, for my part, felt a sudden weariness, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away, leaving behind a bittersweet mixture of satisfaction and a pang of sadness. The victory was mine, yes, but at a cost that still weighed on my heart, the growing distance and the pain of seeing my son so changed. For the rest of the day, I immersed myself in the joy of the retreat, seeking comfort and peace in the company of the seniors and volunteers. The stories they shared, the laughter, the sincere hugs, all of it reminded me of the true purpose of life and the legacy of love Mark had left me. The cabin, with its familiar scent of pine and damp earth, had never felt so alive, so full of light. I felt like a lighthouse, guiding those who needed a safe harbor, and it was an indescribable feeling of fulfillment. However, The calm was deceptive. Patricia's look, the one that promised retaliation, had seared itself into my mind, and I knew she wouldn't give up so easily. Her ambition and pride were powerful forces, and the public humiliation would certainly fuel them further. I tried to push these thoughts away, but they lingered, a dark cloud on the horizon of my apparent victory. A week after the retreat, as I was beginning to return to my routine and the cabin had settled back into its usual quiet, I received a letter. The envelope, on elegant letterhead, bore the logo of a renowned law firm from the city. My heart went cold. I opened the letter with trembling hands, the premonition that something bad was about to happen, confirming itself with every line. The letter was from Patricia and Daniel, through their lawyers, announcing a lawsuit. They were suing me. The claim was that I had prevented Daniel from enjoying his rightful inheritance, the cabin, and that in doing so, I was depriving him of an asset that belonged to him by right. The document argued that the life estate clause was obscure, and that Daniel, as the only son, should have full rights to the property. It was a direct, calculated attack designed to destabilize me and force me to concede. My body shook with anger and disbelief. How could they be so dishonest, so blinded by ambition? The letter also mentioned a recent appraisal of the cabin, attaching a document that wildly overestimated the property's value, certainly to increase the pressure and potential damages if they won. They wanted not only the cabin, but also substantial compensation for losses and damages and emotional distress. It was Patricia's revenge, served cold and cruel, and Daniel, once again, was her instrument. The news hit me with the force of a wave. I remembered my friend Robert, the retired attorney, and contacted him immediately. His voice, when he heard mine, was laced with concern. He reassured me, reaffirming the soundness of the life estate clause, but warned that a lawsuit could be long and draining, especially against a law firm with so many resources. "Helen," he said, his voice grave, "they want to wear you down, to exhaust you. This isn't just about the cabin. It's about power and control. The prospect of a legal battle, of being dragged through courtrooms, reliving pain, and exposing my family life, was daunting. I was a woman in my 70s. The idea of facing all that bureaucracy and stress seemed unbearable. But then, I remembered the smile of the lady from the Haven of Hope, the look in Mark's eyes in old photos, the promise I had made to myself not to give in. The sadness and exhaustion were gradually replaced by a new wave of determination. They wanted a war. They would get a war, but I would fight with dignity and justice. My turning point was right there, in that moment, holding the letter in my hands. The humiliation, the betrayal from my own son, Patricia's greed, it all solidified into an unshakable conviction. I would not yield, but I knew I would need more than Robert's help. I would need a strategy, a plan that went beyond legal matters. I needed to understand Patricia and Daniel in a way I hadn't yet. What truly drove them? What secrets did they keep? And, most importantly, how could I use that to my advantage, without sinking to their level of pettiness? The next phase of my battle was just beginning, and I knew it would be even more challenging than the first. The game was about to change, and I needed to be one step ahead. The letter, with its cold and threatening tone, rested on the kitchen table, a physical reminder of the battle that lay ahead. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the materialization of greed and hurt, a symbol of the abyssal distance that had opened up between me and my son. Robert's advice, though comforting, regarding the validity of my life estate, echoed in my mind. They want to wear you down, to exhaust you, and, for a brief moment, I felt the weight of that truth. The prospect of a long and painful legal process, filled with deadlines, hearings, and the reopening of family wounds, was exhausting just to think about. But the exhaustion was quickly overcome by an even stronger resolve. I refused to be worn down, to be exhausted. I would not become the fragile old woman they expected. The flame of determination, lit on the day of the retreat, now burned with greater intensity. Mark would never have given up on what was right, and neither would I. I would remember his strength, his integrity, and I would fight not just for the cabin, but for my place, for my dignity, and for the legacy he left me. Robert's help was essential, but I knew I needed more. I needed a deeper understanding of the situation, of my opponents, what really drove Patricia, and Daniel. How could he be so blind to the truth, so manipulated? I needed to go beyond the superficial facts and unravel the complexities of their motivations. The idea of Patricia wanting the cabin as a financial asset, tied to her father's financial problems, echoed in my mind. That was a thread to pull. Robert, with his vast experience and network of contacts in town, became my confidant and strategist. I asked him to discreetly investigate the financial situation of Patricia's family, especially her father, Mr. Arnold. I didn't want him to do anything illegal. Just gather public information, market rumors, whatever was possible. Robert, initially hesitant to get involved in gossip, agreed, moved by the justice of my cause and the affection he had for Mark. The days turned into weeks of anxious waiting. While Robert worked behind the scenes, I immersed myself in my own reflections. I spent hours at the cabin, looking through old photos, rereading letters from Mark. Every memory was a reminder of the love we had built, a love that could not be erased by greed. I remembered Daniel's early days, a smiling baby, then a curious boy, a teenager with his dreams. Where was that boy? How had he become so cold, so distant? This pain, the pain of a mother watching her son drift away, was almost stronger than the anger over the injustice. The information Robert began to bring me was like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. Patricia's father, Arnold, was indeed in serious financial trouble. His businesses were sinking, and he was accumulating considerable debt. He was known for his risky investments and his tendency to get involved in shady deals. As Robert discreetly hinted, Patricia, being his only daughter, likely felt pressured to help her family out of the hole. The cabin, with its prime location and its market value inflated by the UTS appraisal they had submitted her, would be the salvation for Arnold's problems. This revelation gave me a new perspective. It wasn't just about Patricia's vanity. It was about a desperate, though twisted, need. It didn't justify her actions, but it gave me a tool, a weak point I could exploit. If Patricia needed money, maybe there was a way to resolve this without giving up the cabin, without surrendering to her emotional and legal blackmail. What was most intriguing, however, was what Robert discovered about Daniel. He was being pressured, yes, but there was something more. There was a subplot of insecurity and a desperate desire to please Patricia and her family, to fit into a world he seemed to envy. Daniel, always a bit insecure in his youth, seemed to be losing himself in the shadow of his wife's ambition. This hurt me even more. He wasn't just a villain, he was also a victim of his own weaknesses and of Patricia's manipulations. With this new information in hand, my plan began to redefine itself. I didn't want to destroy my son, just make him see the truth. And Patricia, well, Patricia would have to learn a lesson about respect and honesty. I would need to be strategic, cunning, but always fair. The legal battle would only be one part of the war. The real victory would be redemption, reconnection, if that was even possible. But how could I reach my son's heart and, at the same time, disarm my daughter-in-law's greed without giving up a single penny of what was mine? The answer to that question became the next great mystery to be unraveled. And the solution, I knew. would require courage and wisdom. The information Robert brought me about Arnold's financial difficulties and the pressure Patricia was putting on Daniel was like puzzle pieces slowly forming a clearer picture. The initial anger I felt toward Patricia and the hurt over Daniel began to give way to a complex mix of compassion and an even sharper determination. I saw Daniel, my son, as a pawn in a game that wasn't his, manipulated by an ambition he didn't fully understand. And Patricia, behind her triumphant facade, was hiding a need, a fragility, however distorted it might be. This didn't justify their actions, but it gave me a path, a way to approach them that went beyond mere retaliation. I decided I wouldn't use the information about Arnold to humiliate them further, but rather to de-escalate the situation, to show them that I saw beyond their masks. My fight was no longer just about protecting the cabin, but about the trying to salvage my son's dignity, and perhaps even Patricia's, if she would allow it. I needed a plan that was not only legally sound, but also emotionally intelligent. Robert, sensing the shift in my focus, went from being my lawyer to my confidant and advisor. He helped me map out a strategy that combined a robust legal defense with a subtler, more humane approach. The first step would be to formally respond to the lawsuit, reaffirming my life estate with the undeniable clarity of Mark's document. To this response, we would add a proposal. The proposal was audacious and, I admit, it tied my stomach in knots. I would offer Daniel and Patricia a sum of money, an amount that wouldn't compromise my savings but was significant enough to cover some of Arnold's debts. The condition? They would have to drop the lawsuit, formally recognize my life estate, and, most importantly, commit to seeking professional help, both for their relationship and for managing Patricia's family's finances. The sum would be delivered directly to Arnold, but with the condition that he present a plan to restructure his debts. It was an attempt to offer an honorable way out, a chance to start over without them feeling like they were being crushed or humiliated. It was a mother's act of love, disguised as a legal negotiation. Daniel, upon receiving the proposal, was confused. Robert told me he seemed torn, wavering between Patricia's anger and the relief of a possible solution to his father-in-law's problems. Patricia, in turn, reacted with the expected fury. She saw the proposal as blackmail, a humiliation, but the prospect of a financial solution to her father's problems, without the need for a long and uncertain lawsuit, began to wear her down. The money, after all, was what she was really after. The negotiation was tense. There were long email exchanges between the lawyers, phone calls that ended in silence and frustration. I stood firm, with the unwavering support of Robert and my siblings. To every attack, every threat, I responded with the calm of someone who knows she is acting with justice and a greater purpose. I didn't want them to win, but I wanted them to learn. On one of the calls, Daniel called me directly. His voice was choked, and he sounded like a lost boy. "Mom," he said, "Patricia is furious. She says you're trying to control us." I listened patiently, letting him vent. When he finished, my voice came out soft, but firm. "Daniel," I said, "I'm not trying to control anyone. I'm trying to protect what's mine, what your father and I built, and I'm offering a way out, a chance for you to solve your problems without destroying what's left of our family. Think about it, son. Think about what's really important." My words seemed to have struck a nerve. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on, and I could imagine the internal battle he was fighting. The proposal, once seen as an insult by Patricia Fau, was now becoming a way out. She realized the risk of losing the lawsuit was high, and that public exposure of her father's problems would be devastating to the image she so carefully curated. Greed and need, in the end, began to speak louder than pride. After days of stalemate, Robert called me with the news. They had accepted the proposal, Not without reservations, not without additional demands that Robert skillfully navigated, but they had accepted. A part of me felt immense relief, but another felt a deep sadness. Peace had been bought, but the wound in my relationship with my son was still open. I knew the money wouldn't bring back the Daniel of before, but it was a start. However, their acceptance of the proposal didn't mean everything was resolved. I felt that Patricia was holding on to a plan B, a card up her sleeve that she would reveal at the right moment. Caution, for me, was now more important than ever. The war was over, but the peace was still fragile, and I needed to be prepared for the next move. The news of their acceptance of the proposal brought with it a relief mixed with a profound melancholy. The agreement was formalized at a neutral law office, with Robert and Daniel and Patricia's lawyers present. I saw them there, sitting across the table, their faces serious and distant. Patricia, with her impenetrable expression, did not direct a single word or glance my way. Daniel, on the other hand, looked ashamed, his eyes avoiding mine at all costs. He was visibly shaken, and that, somehow, hurt me more than Patricia's anger. It was as if the image of my son was crumbling before my eyes, and I could do nothing to stop it. The agreement was signed, the money transferred to a joint account for Arnold and Patricia, under the supervision of an independent accountant, to ensure it was used for its promised purpose, restructuring the debts. In that moment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The cabin was safe, my life estate unquestionable, but the victory felt hollow, tinged with the sadness of a shattered family. The days that followed were strange. Daniel's phone, once so active in pressuring me, fell silent. Patricia, as expected, withdrew completely. The peace, bought at a price, seemed to have come with an even more deafening silence. My siblings and cousins called, offering support, and I tried to convey a tranquility I didn't always feel. "It's all right, my dears. The cabin is safe," I'd say. But inside, the worry for Daniel persisted like an open wound. Months passed, and Daniel's silence became deafening. No calls, no messages, not even a birthday card, which reminded me that the date was now associated with that painful episode. The little news that came, through mutual acquaintances, was fragmented. Patricia had become even more distant, and Arnold's financial situation, though temporarily stabilized, was still the subject of whispers around town. Daniel, according to some reports, was increasingly isolated, working excessively, trying to meet Patricia's expectations and needs. The image that came to mind was of a lost man, trapped in a maze he had helped build. I tried to fill the void with activities, with the company of my friends, and especially with the cabin. I would walk through the gardens, water the flowers, sit on the porch, watching the mountains and feeling Mark's presence. I remembered the happy moments, the laughter, the plans we had made for that place. And amidst these memories, an idea began to germinate in my mind, a way to try to rebuild, not the cabin, but the bridge that had been burned between me and Daniel. I decided I would write a letter, not a letter of demands, nor of resentment, but a letter of love, a letter that told the story of the cabin, of our love, of Mark's dreams for that place, a letter that would remind Daniel of the child he had been, the values we tried to teach him, the importance of family and legacy. I wanted him to know, without demands or accusations, how much he meant to me and how much I missed the son I once knew. I wanted him to understand that the cabin was more than a property. It was a piece of our history, a symbol of love and belonging. I spent weeks writing and rewriting the letter, every word weighed, every phrase carefully considered. I wanted it to be sincere, touching, to be able to reach Daniel's heart, even through the barrier Patricia had built. I wrote about the seeds that Mark and he had planted together as a child, about the nights of storytelling in front of the fireplace, about the summers when the cabin was the stage for his childhood adventures. The letter was a retrospective, a flashback to simpler times, to an unconditional love that still existed, despite everything. When the letter was finally ready, I sealed it with a special stamp, one with the image of a pine tree, the tree Mark loved so much. I delivered it to the post office myself, choosing the most secure shipping, hoping it would reach Daniel's hands, and that he would read it. This was my last resort, my final attempt to reach my son. I knew the response could be silence, indifference, or even Patricia's anger. But I had to try. Delivering the letter marked a new stage in my journey, a moment of profound vulnerability and an agonizing wait for a sign, for any indication that the flame of a mother's love could still rekindle the spark in his heart. What would he do with my words? That was the question that haunted me day and night. The letter, sealed with the pine tree Mark so loved, set off for its uncertain destination, carrying with it not just words, but the hope and heart of a mother. That week was a purgatory of anxiety. Every time the phone rang, I held my breath, hoping to hear Daniel's voice, or perhaps Patricia's, with some reaction. But the silence persisted, thick and painful. I knew the response might not come immediately, or perhaps ever, but the waiting was a heavy burden. I tried to keep busy, tending the garden, preparing meals for neighbors, but my mind was always on Daniel, imagining him reading my words, reliving the memories I had carefully woven into each sentence. One afternoon, as I was on the porch, rocking in Mark's old chair, the mail carrier arrived. It was not a letter from Daniel. It was a small box wrapped in simple gift paper. Inside, there was a note. The handwriting was not Patricia's. It was a bit shaky, but familiar. It was from Lucy, my cousin. "Helen, dear, I found this by chance. Maybe it's important." Inside the box was a small, old diary with a faded leather cover and a ring. A ring I recognized immediately. It was Mark's college ring, which he always wore, with his alma mater's crest. My heart leaped. Mark had lost that ring years ago, and he was devastated. We had searched everywhere, without success. How had Lucy found it? And why was she sending it now? I began to read the diary, and with each page, a new layer of mystery was revealed. It was not Mark's diary, but that of one of his great aunts, a woman who had lived in the cabin before us. The diary, written in an elegant and somewhat formal hand, described life at the cabin decades earlier, the construction of each room, the family parties, the mountain landscapes. But amidst the daily descriptions, there was an intriguing subplot. Mark's great-aunt mentioned an old local legend about a hidden treasure on the cabin's land, a treasure not of gold or jewels, but of historical documents and old letters of great value to the community, written by a family ancestor who was a local chronicler. She wrote of a secret place, where the oldest pine kisses the sky and the earth keeps secrets. The mention of Mark's ring, however, was on one of the last pages, dated much later. The great-aunt wrote that, during a deep clean, she had found a shiny object hidden in a secret compartment in the fireplace. She described it in detail, and I knew it was Mark's ring. She mentioned that, for some reason, she decided not to return it immediately, perhaps out of forgetfulness or because she was ill at the time, and had kept it with some of the treasure documents, thinking she would return it one day. In a later note, she wrote, "Young Mark, who has always loved this place, will find these secrets when the time is right. He has a pure heart." I was bewildered. The diary, the ring, the legend of the treasure. It all led me back to the cabin, our cabin, which now seemed to hold even more secrets. The fireplace. I remembered Mark, always fascinated by old architectural details. He had renovated the fireplace years ago, and I never imagined it could hide anything. I stood up, the diary in my trembling hands, the ring in my pocket. The cabin's fireplace was sturdy, made of stone, with old carvings. I ran my fingers over every inch, searching for any crack, any secret compartment, and then I felt it. Behind one of the larger stones, a small indentation, almost imperceptible. With my fingertips, I pushed. A soft click. The stone pivoted gently inward, revealing a small, dark cavity. My heart was racing. Inside, there was a small wooden box, aged by time, and a few yellowed letters. I opened the box carefully. Inside, I found not only more historical documents, chronicles of the town, and accounts of the lives of the first settlers in the region, as the great-aunt had written, but also an extra envelope. It was a letter, in Mark's handwriting. My name was written on the envelope. For Helen, when the time is right, the handwriting said. My hands were shaking so much I could barely open it. This was Mark's voice, coming from the past, whispering a secret he had kept. What could Mark have written to me, hidden in that secret place? And why now? With each revelation, the mystery of the cabin deepened, and I felt I was about to discover something that would change everything. Mark's letter, enclosed in an envelope yellowed by time, lay in my trembling hands. My heart was beating so hard, I could feel it reverberating in my ears. The light of the setting sun, streaming through the cabin window, tinged the paper a soft gold, as if blessing this moment of discovery. Mark's memories, the legend of the treasure, the lost ring, and now this letter. It all fit into a narrative that he, my eternal Mark, had orchestrated from beyond, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. With fingers that barely obeyed me, I opened the envelope, the scent of old paper, and, to my surprise, a faint hint of the cologne Mark used filled my nostrils, instantly transporting me to the past. The familiar handwriting, strong and decisive, filled the page. "My dearest Helen," the letter began, and I felt a lump in my throat, tears blurring my vision. "If you are reading this, it means you found our little secret, my great-aunt's diary, and, I hope, my ring. I knew you would one day. This cabin, my love, has always been more than bricks and timber. It is our story, the story of my family, and the story of a love that transcends time." Mark went on, explaining that he had found the diary and his great-aunt's ring years before. During a renovation of the fireplace, he had read about the treasure, the historical documents, and had been enchanted by the idea that the cabin held so many secrets. But most importantly, he explained, was the final part of his great-aunt's diary, where she mentioned that the real treasure is not what is found, but what is shared. "I kept these documents, Helen," Mark's letter continued, "and my ring as well, knowing there would come a time when you would need a clue, a sign. I didn't want anyone's greed to take from you what is yours by right and by love. But I also wanted you to know that the greatest wealth we have is not in material possessions, but in the bonds we build, the memories we share, and the love we cultivate. Use these documents wisely, my love, to honor our history and to show the world the true value of generosity and justice." He then described in detail the documents that were in the box. They were, indeed, local chronicles rich in historical information, pioneer accounts, descriptions of events that shaped the region. They were documents worth a fortune, not in money, but in historical and cultural value. Mark had secretly donated these documents during his lifetime to a local museum, on the condition that they only be revealed after his death and, if possible, at my discretion. A certified copy of the donation was enclosed with the letter. He had done this to protect the historical heritage and shrewdly, so that the cabin would never be coveted for what it was truly worth historically. The letter ended with words of love, encouragement, and a promise. Never forget, my Helen, that my love for you is eternal, and that the strength you possess is greater than any obstacle. Use it for good, for justice, for love, and know that I am always with you, in every ray of sun that lights the cabin, in every scent of pine and damp earth. Tears streamed freely down my face, but they were not tears of sadness, but of immense gratitude, of a renewed love, and of a strength that Mark, even in his absence, continued to give me. He had been a visionary, a guardian, and his wisdom now gave me the tools for an even deeper resolution. The discovery of the historical documents and Mark's letter was the point of greatest tension and emotional resolution. Not only was the cabin safe due to my life estate and my cunning, but now I held a far greater legacy, a treasure of knowledge and history that would transcend any material greed. That treasure, which Patricia and Daniel could never have imagined, was the true wealth the cabin held. And I knew that this discovery, revealed publicly, would not only seal the victory of good, but also bring a new dimension to the cabin's story and my own journey. The next phase would not just be about protecting the cabin, but about revealing its true value, the value of its history, and the love that built it. What would Patricia and Daniel do when the world discovered what the cabin truly represented and the role Mark had played in its preservation? The climax was near. The revelation of Mark's letter and the historical documents was like a silent earthquake, shaking the foundations of my soul and completely redefining the meaning of the cabin. I felt as if I had been given a map, a guide to a treasure far greater than any material possession. Mark, in his wisdom and generosity, had planted the seeds of a legacy that extended beyond the two of us, a legacy that belonged to the community and to history. With the help of Robert, who was awestruck by Mark's foresight, we organized the unveiling of the documents. The local museum, already aware of Mark's secret donation, was eager to display the chronicles and historical accounts. We decided to hold a simple ceremony at the cabin itself to emphasize the connection between the place and the history it held. I invited the seniors from the Haven of Hope, the volunteers from the retreat, my siblings and cousins, and, of course, the local press. I wanted the story of Mark and the cabin to be told publicly, so everyone would know the true value of that place. Robert, with his network of contacts, also discreetly arranged for Daniel and Patricia to receive an invitation to the event. It was not an invitation to a party, but to a celebration of local history and the legacy of Mark. I didn't know if they would come, but I felt it was important that they have the opportunity to witness the unfolding of the truth. On the day of the ceremony, the cabin was radiant. The mountains served as a majestic backdrop, and the morning sun illuminated the garden that Mark had cultivated with so much love. The colorful banners from the Haven of Hope retreat still swayed gently in the breeze, a reminder of the event that had ushered in a new era for the cabin. The seniors were seated, their curious eyes and wrinkled faces full of expectation. The press was in position, their cameras and recorders ready to capture every word. I began to speak, my voice calm and serene, but filled with emotion. I told the story of the cabin, of my love for Mark, of our life there. I spoke of the great-aunt's diary, the legend of the treasure, and the discovery of the secret compartment in the fireplace. And then, with hands that were trembling but firm, I revealed Mark's letter and the historical documents. The commotion in the audience was palpable. The story of the cabin, which had once been just a home for me, now took on a much larger dimension, becoming a cultural heritage of the region. The journalists crowded around, asking questions, and I answered with the dignity Mark would have expected. I explained that Mark had donated the documents to the museum, ensuring their preservation for future generations. I spoke of his vision, his generosity, and his love for history. And then, in a moment of inspiration, I showed Mark's college ring, explaining how it had been found alongside the documents. The ring, symbolizing Mark's wisdom and perseverance, was now a link between the past and the present. It was at that moment that I saw Daniel and Patricia arrive. They stood on the edge of the crowd, watching the scene with a mixture of shock and something that looked like admiration. Patricia, who had always sought status and ostentation, now saw the cabin in a new light, not as a material asset to be exploited, but as a treasure of immeasurable value. Daniel here, for his part, was pale, his eyes fixed on me and the documents I was presenting. He seemed, for the first time in a long time, to see the true dimension of what his father and I had built. The ceremony continued, and the museum directors formally received the documents, thanking Mark for his generosity and praising my initiative. I felt at peace, a deep and lasting peace. I had resolved the main conflicts. The cabin was protected, Mark's legacy was honored, and the truth about his wisdom and altruism had been revealed. Patricia's greed had been exposed not by my words, but by the grandeur of Mark's legacy. And Daniel, well, Daniel was there, witnessing everything, and I felt a faint hope that this experience could be a catalyst for his own transformation. The story of the cabin was complete, and my own journey was nearing its end, but with a new and promising horizon. The ceremony for the donation of the historical documents to the museum was more than an event. It was a rite of passage, a conclusion to a journey that had taken me to the depths of pain and back into the light. Watching Daniel and Patricia standing at a distance, I could see in their faces a complex array of emotions: shock, perhaps regret, and, in Daniel, a shadow of admiration. I hadn't sought their humiliation, but their understanding, and on that day, I felt that, somehow, the message had been delivered. The cabin, once an object of greed, had revealed itself to be a sanctuary of history and memory, a testament to Mark's love and generosity, and that was a lesson more powerful than any direct confrontation. In the days that followed, the cabin filled with a new kind of energy. The articles in the local newspapers were moving, highlighting not only the discovery of the documents, but also the story of Mark and my role in honoring his legacy. The cabin became a point of interest, with visits from historians, students, and community members who wanted to see the place that held so many secrets. I became a sort of guardian, sharing the stories, showing the corners that Mark had loved so much. It was a new phase, and I felt more alive than ever. My contact with Daniel, though not yet fully restored, began to change. A few weeks after the ceremony, I received a call from him. His voice was different, softer, less tense. "Mom," he said, I saw the articles and the ceremony. I didn't know. I had no idea about any of it. It was a start, a thin thread of communication I had been hoping for so long. I didn't scold him. I didn't accuse him. I just listened, and when he finished, I replied with the same calm Mark would have used. "Your father was a very special man, Daniel. He believed that stories, our roots, were our true treasure." The silence that followed was not one of awkwardness, but of reflection. Daniel's transformation wasn't immediate or complete, but it was visible. He started visiting me at the cabin, initially with a timid demeanor, then more frequently. He didn't bring Patricia, but we would talk, sit on the porch, and he would listen to my stories about Mark and the cabin. I saw him looking at the documents in the museum, then back at the cabin, and I felt that he was slowly reconnecting with his own roots, with the memory of his father. He never formally apologized for his actions, but his visits, his glances, his questions about the past were his own way of asking for forgiveness. Patricia, for her part, never came near the cabin again. The news about her father's financial troubles continued, and I learned that she was forced to face the reality of her situation without the easy fix the cabin would have represented. I held no grudge against her. There was a sadness, yes, in seeing ambition blind a person, but also an understanding that everyone reaps what they sow. My journey taught me that true strength lies not in blind stubbornness, but in the resilience of the heart, in the ability to forgive, to transform pain into love. I learned that the most valuable legacy is not material, but what is shared, what is built with generosity and justice. The cabin, which was once the stage for a dispute, became a symbol of overcoming, of human connection, and of the wisdom that resides in history. Today, at 73, I continue to be the guardian of the cabin, but no longer with the cold fury of injustice, but with the serenity of one who has found peace. Daniel and I are still building our bridge, one brick at a time, but there is hope. The scent of pine and damp earth remains the perfume of my happiness, the aroma of my cabin, our sanctuary. But now, it carries with it not only the memories of the past, but also the promise of a future of reunion, of healing, and of a love that, like the surrounding mountains, is eternal and unshakable. My life has been a tapestry woven with threads of joy, pain, perseverance, and unconditional love, and every stitch, every color, has made me the woman I am today, strong, resilient, and full of hope.